Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Interlinked, the official podcast of Neo Tokyo, powered by Shrapnel.
Brace yourself for impact, crypto gamers. I am reporting from the sacrifice zone. STX 3.2 dates have just been announced, and it's going to be going down from July 25th to July 30th. Make sure to block off your calendars so you don't miss out on those mission rewards. These missions come in two different types, ones that earn you Shrap and ones that earn you weapon skins. These missions could be getting a certain amount of kills with a specific weapon, or extracting with a certain amount of weapon skin fragments or Sigma, and you'll want to complete these missions as the prize pool for 3.2 is 1 million Shrap. And if you just can't get enough Shrap, pick up an operator NFT, as holders are going to get 50% of that million Shrap pool. Huge shout out to our sponsor, Playa3ull Games. They are inspired by gamers and funded by their community. They have a epic game on the Epic Games Store, a third-person shooter called Nexus. Hop on in there and check that out. They're also currently selling nodes, so if you're interested, check that out at their website, playable.games. That is a 3 instead of a B on Playable. Now strap in for the rest of this episode of Interlinked.
Today, we have the two legends from Planet Mojo, Michael and Antonio. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. A little
Doing
hungover
well.
watching football.
Well, hopefully we can cure that with some good crypto gaming alpha here as we chat on the call today. And as always, side by side with me, the two most legendary co-hosts of all time, Mr. Nick, Mr. Jared. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. As we were sort of chatting about before the pod started, the only benefit of this BTC price action is it looks like we're finally going to get out of this range for maybe the worst.
Yeah, that's going to be a rough one. We'll see, but happy to be here.
Awesome,
See my
guys.
Adam's apple move. Go ahead.
All right, so we're all holding back a few tiers for our portfolios. We'll just pour one out for the homies. But let's go ahead and jump in. We have a lot more exciting things to talk about today, which is Planet Mojo, and what you guys are building over there. So would love to really do a deep dive. We have the full hour. Let's go long form. Would love to just kind of get the origin story from you guys. Like, what is Planet Mojo? Who are you guys? How did all this come into being? Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay. I'm happy to start since this is I can tell the origin story, I guess. Yeah, I mean, starting with, I guess, my background and the team, and then I'll let Antonio do himself. But we're longtime game devs. I've personally been in game dev since the early 90s. When I started at LucasArts, it was Lucasfilm Games, then it became LucasArts, and that's where I really cut my teeth, learned so much there, just about the process, but obviously it's evolved a lot over the years. And after my stint there, sort of towards the end of the 90s, I ended up doing a startup with people from ILM, which is Lucas's effects division, for movies and stuff, because I interacted a lot with them. But that really kind of gave me the startup mentality after doing that a little bit. And I kind of moved back to the East Coast of the US where I grew up or near it. And really been in startups kind of ever since in the gaming world, and always tend to gravitate to bleeding edge tech. Sometimes it's those journeys are always interesting, and people always think the future is going to be here sooner than it comes, because these things do take time, I've learned, and come in waves and whatnot. But yeah, we did service work for a long time for, big companies, Hasbro and Spin Master, a lot of toy related stuff, but also got heavily into, AR and VR over the years, and worked with Niantic, and did a lot of marketing stuff sort of towards the end of that stint too, like things for the Super Bowl and things. And yeah, and I always forget to mention, I always drop this part out of the cut, but yeah, in those early days too, we did a lot of work for the music industry. We ran our own virtual world, doing virtual concerts. We worked with so many music artists. We worked with Jay-Z for a long time, making a Facebook game for him, which was that's a whole separate podcast. But yeah, lots of artists, and that was a interesting experience too, and just dealing with community really sort of helped us with a lot of the things we deal with today. So anyways, yeah, like after AR, we ended up sort of right during the pandemic. To make a long story short, we got a deal to do a VR game, which was based on Sam and Max, if people are gamers, which is a sort of legendary comic book duo that LucasArts made games of, and then Telltale. So sort of like this underground gaming indie phenomenon. So we got a chance to make a VR game out of it. That was totally fun. And that's kind of when, in the middle of that, during the pandemic, like that's when NFTs started blowing up. And I had heard of blockchain before, but really very little. Crypto kitties, I kind of looked at it. It really got my attention, but decided to wait. And at this point, I was like, okay, wow, this something's happening here. And the deeper I looked, it just was like a endless rabbit hole, really, the overwhelming amounts of information to consume, which I kind of like and it's fun because I like to learn new things. But it is like when you're starting in this space, it's just like, what are all these different chains? What's the difference? Like, it's just a lot to consume. So, and we'd been in AR and VR before. I thought that was a lot. That was like that's kid stuff, compared to what we've had to absorb in blockchain. But yeah, looking back on it though, we got in really at the wave, the height of Web3, sort of, peak frenzy, at least with investment, and we're able to, bring on great and be very selective too at the beginning, working with great funds like Animoca, um, and Merit Circle, many others I could mention. Um, and yeah, had great partners along the way. And so yeah, Planet Mojo really, it was also in the peak of kind of metaverse hype and stuff. And we sort of, just coming from games a long time too, we just looked at this as like every time there's a paradigm shift, which I definitely think this is, that's really when you see new IP emerge. And we've obviously seen that in blockchain. You're not seeing like the big brands. I mean, they've dabbled, NFTs, that shit, but like really this is a chance for new IP. And that's sort of the history of games. When new consoles emerge, when new phones, mobile, etc. That's when these dominant IP, and we love to make original worlds and characters. That's what we've always done. And so it was kind of a chance to blend that. And Mojo, I kind of live out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. That's what I retreated to after my Bay Area days, and sort of got that from Lucas kind of too, honestly, just going out to Skywalker Ranch. Like it just gave me that, oh, nature's kind of cool if you're stuck in front of a screen 13 to 14 hours a day. I can take a 5-minute break, walk out to my garden. So anyways, I've always had these sort of nature themed kind of things, and just sort of wanted to build this sort of parallel, excuse me, kind of story about nature and technology and how we're living all through it, but we don't want to do anything preachy. And, we tell this story through all these different mediums. One thing I thought was cool about blockchain games in the beginning, of course, looking back on it, is because like there weren't any games, but just like seeing how stories were told through Twitter, through Medium articles, through YouTubes and cinematics and all these, we have a Twitter account for one of our lead characters who was very active for a long time. I don't know, he was tweeting from Planet Mojo, but he had a great connection. So yeah, that was fun. And then, building these games and through this universe, and just really as gamers seemed obvious to us, sort of the digital asset part, in terms of letting players own these assets that they've been sort of renting up to now in centralized, type situations. Definitely wanted to have our NFTs be as integrated into the game as we could. And that's kind of been part of our mission throughout this. And obviously making fun games. We've done a lot too in terms of trying to bring this to the mass market, and we've had opportunities. We can talk about this stuff more, but working with Amazon along the way and others that have sort of allowed us to sort of just test out the waters a little bit in terms of like, how does someone who doesn't even know what a wallet is deal with this and that kind of flow? And so we've sort of taken that mentality into the mobile games, Mojo Melee. If you look at kind of our onboarding flow in particular, someone said this to me, which I thought was hysterical, is like he called it the mullet approach to blockchain games, which is, it's sort of not very short up front. You can't really see it, but it's there in the background and certainly very accessible for people who want to engage on that level. But we kind of realized early on, like, we can't push this on people, and so it's sort of there for people. We try to just make it, we can talk more about this, but we try to make it more of the normal game flow progression and things that, treat it as a reward more than a gateway, I guess. Anyways, I've rambled a long time. Go ahead, Antonio.
Oh God, why do I have to introduce myself always after you, Mike? But well, my background is kind of weird. I come from a very analytical background. My degree is actually in pure mathematics, statistics. And Mike unfortunately knows this. He has to hear me ramble about probability distributions every time we need to do something around NFTs and stuff and what's best and whatnot. But I'm a marketing director here at Planet Mojo. I've been in the space for quite a few years now. That means, as we were talking about before the recording started, my bags are down. I was heavy into NFTs, in the concept. And obviously, I fell in love with the concept itself, right? Like the risk-on assets are fun because their community creates around it, as long as it may last. A lot of stuff doesn't exist anymore from the origins in what, I don't know, 2019, 2020 when I started, right? So longevity is another big aspect that most likely we will dive into within this hour that we have for ourselves. But I do think that there's a lot of potential here, right? When it comes to gaming, we're talking about this too. I've been a gamer my entire life. I love esports. I love esports events. I love everything that surrounds competitive gaming too, just as much as and I've worked with mid-core and hyper casual and mobile that sometimes has this maybe less competitive target, which is not true. So it's more of a stigma, right? But again, competitive people are everywhere. And again, we will dive into this later on, I think. But this competitive aspect, and again, it always shapes around community. I think it's very important, and it is something that will help us break out of this echo chamber, which again is something I will talk about a lot, because I was scrolling Twitter a little bit before, right? And I saw this meme by one of these KOLs we have on crypto Twitter, and it was about some Web3 gaming projects that like to put medals over their own ads about KPIs, right? And about how they're the best in the Web3 industry. But then you break out of the Web3 industry and you get absolutely destroyed, right? So the idea here is to build something long term. That's why we always want to talk about longevity, especially in this space. And we want to build something that appeals and that makes us connect with a wide variety of gamers that are not only Web3 gamers. And why not take the mullet approach in which we give these features to gamers, not only to Web3 gamers, and at some point they will realize it will be because of the NFTs that they hate so much, because we've seen it everywhere, right? As soon as the NFT word is mentioned on Steam pages, on Reddit, everywhere, people like to start like 1-star review bombing titles left and right. So yeah, hopefully we'll break out this stigma. And hopefully we're making the right steps here at Planet Mojo for us to progress forward as a space too.
Oh, Ben, we started at the same time. Take it.
Unmute chicken. But yeah, I would love to actually do a bit of a deeper dive into the core game loop and just really understand like where did that come from? What was the thought? What makes it fun? How'd you design it? All that kind of stuff.
Well, so to be clear, we have a few games now. We have Mojo Melee, we have Go Go Mojo, which is web only still. And we've broken out our Mojo Maker, which is really something we put a lot of work into, and so we want it to be standalone. And that is our on-chain avatar system, which runs through for the Mojos, runs through both games, and will continue for other games that we're working on, which we can talk about too, like Prophecy of the Ancients and things like that. So from the beginning, we did have this idea of sort of having an ecosystem, an interoperable ecosystem. Interoperability was such a big buzzword, when we got into this space, but as game devs were like, yeah, that's not happening for a very long fucking time. So, but we're like, we can do it, we could control it, and we could even have an SDK where others could build off it, which is, where we want to be eventually with this. And yeah, so anyways, I mean, we started with Mojo Melee as the first one. And first of all, like I said, we sort of were following the playbook early and had our NFTs before the game. But as opposed to putting out like whatever badges or things like that, like I said, we wanted these to actually be your digital characters you were playing with, that could change their stats and update. And as we've done with the Mojos, really customize them. And we even do that a little with the champions and the skins. And yeah, with Mojo Melee, I think also we saw early in this space, kind of like what Antonio was saying, is that there's definitely this competitive aspect to it, right? People want to battle, they want to sort of go head to head, they want to wager, etc. And when I got into this space, just learning about Axie, that was obvious. One takeaway I had is just kind of those kind of battle type games. And so when we were looking at what to build, we also, knowing we were going to build more games, we Mojo Melee, which is an auto chess game, if I didn't say that, which is sort of in the spirit of team fight tactics. If people know these games, probably the most popular now, but many others out there, which kind of exploded on the scene in 2019. And we love those games. People on our team play them religiously, but it occurred to us pretty on that they really weren't, most of them are not made for mobile. They're really not friendly mobile experiences. The match times take 30 minutes, which is great if you have the time and you're playing on PC, but it just doesn't fit into the typical play pattern. So that was kind of our vision at the beginning, is like make something with as much strategy and depth as those games, but in sort of a more of a bite form type play pattern. And so we sort of built in a lot of familiar Web 2 mechanics into it because, the NFTs were kind of the linchpin, until the token, which we can talk about, and that the utility that we've added there. But really letting people progress through the battle pass and move through the different levels, ranking up, playing better players, unlocking all these new amazing assets that they can play with in the game, being able to sort of UGC their characters, their teams. And, it was also something we're always changing the meta for it. We're about to launch season 7. So there's always new. We changed some sort of things in the sort of details of these games too. And that was partly because of Web3 also, but partly because we wanted to experiment and sort of change the formula a little bit. So typically in auto chess, we're getting a little deeper here. You're pulling from a shared deck. So, and it's actually limited the monetization of these games typically. TFT is a little different in China and such, but and they really changed the formula there too because of that. But so what we did, we're like, hey, players are gonna own these assets, right? So let's let them sort of add that collectability also from free to play. We know this works, sort of being able to unlock different characters. And from a Web3 player standpoint, they could obviously get them in open markets and come into the game, sort of we build in the metadata, so as they're leveling up, you can kind of see where they're at and different, if they're mojos, different parts that they've, be wearing and customize. So it's all kind of part of that whole loop. And we're kind of also at the same time, you're always sort of thinking dual-minded in terms of Web3 players and Web2 players, because we're releasing these games out into the wild on the app stores. And if it's successful, the vast majority of these players are not going to be Web3 players. They're not going to know anything about it. And so that's why we decided, again, back to sort of that onboarding flow to, first we have to make people like the game. If we start putting up Web3 stuff immediately, I was reading something this morning all about game economies and Web3 and how critical it is. And yes, it's true, but I mean, but so is having a fun game. Like it's sort of like I keep hearing the argument go back and forth, and that's kind of one reason this space is not for the weak of heart, because you got to do both. Both are important, and putting out a Web2 game just in itself is incredibly hard, and just the analytics and tracking everything and sort of tracking your retention and just sort of your LTV and seeing if a game can be successful. And then, the Web3 stuff has to be sort of layered in there as well. So like I said, for us, like we wanted to, at least on the Web2 side, and as we sort of differentiated a little between web and mobile too, because this is a cross-platform game. You can play it, same account on the web. And we sort of early on were like, we felt web games and something we're very bullish on for now and the future. Just a great way to access the Web3 audience, easier to attach wallets, all that kind of stuff. But we made the choice to have a cross-platform game early on, and that's, not a small thing to do with a small team, which we are, and keep parity with all these versions. There's always that sort of waiting for the App Store to approve Android and iOS. Like, hurry up, you got to get this approved so we can, get our web version out. And because we sort of have a central server and everyone can play each other versus these, web and iOS. So anyways, like, yeah, the onboarding to us was very important in that flow. And really what we did for sort of those players to introduce them to Web3 really was, as I said earlier, treat it as a reward as they play the game and they put in some time and level up their characters. In our game, when you hit level 20, you kind of get this pop-up and, hey, you've won the ability to create a digital vault, or as we call it in the game, and have a digital collectible. And honestly, sadly, we know this so much that players don't read anything in games for the most part. I mean, it's like green button, click it, collect the reward. So lots of people in our game are like minting NFTs and collecting these, and surely they have no idea what they are. And that's fine. It's just part of the normal game flow. But like we look at like free to play, there is this conversion percentage. No one knows what that magic number is yet, because it took 10 years in free to play to sort of establish norms and things like that. So, but whatever it is, 2%, 5%, I know Reddit, right? When they did their huge sample, I remember hearing they got like 5% of those people or something, 5 or 10% brought those assets over into like other wallets. So, you get that kind of conversion. That's pretty good, if you have a successful mobile game and kind of bring those people in. And yeah, I mean, we've always felt, and I still feel pretty strongly, and I think we're seeing this play out now. This is probably going a little outside your question, but let's just go there. Let's see, like this is how I describe this space in one way, at least, right? Like, because we look throughout kind of the history of media and similar things that I think are parallels, like collectible markets, right? Like trading cards like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, comic books, whatever it is, right? Whatever it's been first. The natural ebb and flow of that is first there's like a mass market and all these people get into it. And then the collectors emerge out of that, right? The what I call the extremophiles, right? And what I think happened in Web3 is it happened in reverse order, which I can't think there's many examples of first, right? Like where the collectors emerge first, but you still need that mass market, I think, to balance that out, right? Because like the sort of mass market also helps make these things be worth, things to people, and they emerge, and the rarity and playing. And so that balance, I think, is important. That's why we've always tried to think of both of these as equally important, and having both markets happy. I don't think we've really seen that balance emerge yet because there hasn't been a big enough audience of a Web 2 game come into a Web 3 game yet, but we're going to see that happen. So anyways, I'll stop there.
Well, I know you dove into the auto chess battler Mojo Melee. Could you give a quick overview on Go-Go Mojo?
Yeah, so Go-Go Mojo is like an endless runner, like inspired by Subway Surfers. We wanted to build something. Mojo Melee is, it is kind of a niche game. Not everyone loves auto chess and auto battlers and PvP, and we wanted to have kind of a more casual entry into the universe and ecosystem, and we wanted to show off that interoperability of the characters because we knew we could do it. And so it's a really fun, endless runner. If you like Subway Surfers, people always reference Temple Run, but Subway Surfers is really the king of endless runners. And so we modeled it a lot off that. We may, bust it out into a full app as well with monetization. But right now we've sort of highlighted it during different campaigns we've done and quests, and it's kind of used it as more of a, also when we give out rewards, it has a central, our soft and hard currency in the game. It uses the same ones. And of course the NFTs of the Mojos. But so if you buy gems, or you won gems or one of our chests, you can use it in either game. And in Go-Go Mojo, you can get like boosts and all these sort of different speed up power-ups you get in kind of endless runners, double jumps, things like that. But yeah, it's fun, and it's something we have some ideas about expanding in the future.
And I'd love to tag back to your VR experience. I think there's some interesting parallels between getting people through the Web3 hurdle and getting people through the VR hurdle. They differ because the biggest hurdle, I think, for VR is the purchase price of the equipment, which
Yep.
they obviously make extremely easy. Obviously, it's a financial investment, but as far as you can hop on Amazon and get an Oculus, and that's about as easy as it freaking gets. And then once you get into the ecosystem, I put my mom, who's at constant war with technology. Her number one enemy is the iPad, her email, remembering passwords, logging
I
into
gotta
Netflix.
introduce her to my mom. So good.
Oh yeah, they'd get on. But I put an Oculus in Beat Saber on her head, and I was like, try this. And she played it until the batteries died. And she had never touched any game in her entire life, but it's so intuitive. So would just be curious if there are any sort of experiences from your time in that realm that you think have parallels for Web3.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, that one, I think it's actually different because, and this is true in AR too, and in VR, the first time you try them, there is this holy fuck moment because it's the first time you've tried it. That's not true in Web3. There's not a holy fuck moment. It takes a while to figure it out. How do I set this up? What's going on? Oh, I have, it's like maybe when you make money and you sell something the first time, that's you're like, oh, this is why I'm here. Um, so there was a little like, and I think VR and AR have suffered from that, right? Like, there's very few examples other than like, let's talk about AR mobile, and that's one of the reasons we got out of that space, right? Is like, I didn't want to be a marketing company doing like 15-second Super Bowl AR things or whatever. Because like AR games, as Niantic has found out, without that massive license, sort of attached to it. And hey, Pokemon Go, they makes incredible money, but like it had that aha cultural moment at first, right? And then that boiled down to kind of this core community who still plays it, which is very large, but it different from what it was. And the same thing with VR. Like as much as your mom loved it, I mean, this is usually the typical pattern. Um, People just don't put on their headsets on a regular basis. Is she gonna want to play Beat Saber in 2 months, 3 months, or any? I mean, I'll just tell you honestly, since we finished Sam and Max, first of all, every member of our team was getting headaches regularly because when you're when you're developing all day wearing, that's why more and more I was like, yeah, blockchain's better. I don't want to put that thing on. Could look at my screen again. But I think it's going to find its place. It's like this is always, again, when I was talking about the cycles, and if you study this stuff, the trough of disillusionment, that's kind of what VR is arguably in right now. And I was just saying to a friend yesterday, it's like when VR headsets are $50, when they're just like a nothing, 50 to $100, and sadly they're going up in price, not down. I don't get that, but just I do get why, but new technology. But like, I think it has to be something that the grandparents can buy for their kids, at Christmas. It's just a no-brainer, and it'll find a place. And I think, AR and mixed reality will too. Um, I think with Web3, it's a little bit, the parallels are more on the community side, like the people who are here and the journey we're all going through. That, because I was in the AR community, I was in the VR community, it's very similar. Here, there's a little bit more up and down, oh, we're back. Oh, no, we're not. Oh, we're back. But, in AR, VR, I just lived through that where there was just so much excitement at the beginning, Magic Leap, and oh my God, this is like we're not even going to be using iPhones in a few years. And there's just a real level that this was going to change the world kind of thing. And then eventually the air kind of leaves the room a little bit. And it's like, oh shit, these companies get funded, products come out, like look at the Apple Vision Pro. It's like, this is amazing. It's like, okay, what's anyone doing with this, on a regular basis? And what problem is it really going to solve? So anyway, as you see, I can ramble on these things all day, but I think the thing with blockchain and why I'm still here and why I believe in it is, and I'm not the only one to say this, is that we're just going to get to a space where like we don't even call, like we shouldn't even be talking about Web3 games per se. It's just a feature. It's just something that's in the game. Gamers don't care if you're using AWS or Google Cloud, or it just has to be fun and easy to use and play. And so there does have to be a mentality shift. And I think that will happen over time where it's just like, why do I want to own these assets? Like right now, I do think it's a little bit of a solution looking for a problem, and that is because of the mentality. Because players out there screaming that their assets are being held on centralized servers by Blizzard or Sony. No, they could give a shit because but I think once we've seen this happen just too many times in history. Like you cannot stop an idea, and I do think it's hard to say how long it's going to take, but it will come to the surface. And just like free to play did, a new generation comes along and sort of says, yeah, this is how it should be. And that's why I said when I got into blockchain gaming, is like our kids, whatever, their kids, they're going to look back on us, first generation of gaming, and go, you guys let all those companies get away with that shit? Like, you got to be kidding me. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I wanted to reach out to Antonio. I know you're the head of marketing, and kind of go through, in light of what Michael said, as far as, the Web3 sort of friction with Web2 players. What's the general thesis and sort of some specific ideas that you guys have toward marketing both to the Web2 and Web3 audience?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex topic, right? Because did anyone solve the question of how do I target both at the same time? Is there any how many people are actually true gamers and at the same time blockchain savvy? I think I would argue that like the Venn diagram spans only over like how many people are even like in Web3 gaming to begin with, right? Is it even a target worth spending the Web2 gaming budgets on? Web2 gaming budgets span, I don't know, like millions of dollars, right? would you want to spend that kind of money to acquire how many people in Web3? It's in the tens of thousands, optimistically, right? So how do we approach such a problem? Is that you segment your targeting. I think that targeting is definitely at the basis of effective marketing strategies, right? And if you really want to go down in the marketing rabbit hole, right? I see all the time people on crypto Twitter rambling about, oh my God, Web3 marketing has to change. Web2 marketing is much more than this. Why are people not using more SEO? What about the peso marketing approach, paid media, earned media, shared media, own media? What are we doing with domain authority, whatever? And at the same time, Web3 marketers are just here signing deals with KOLs, and that's their marketing strategies. So I'm obviously like being very polarizing in this take, but there's truth in both takes, right? There's meta strategies like in everything, and there's a meta strategy in Web3 marketing too. We've learned, and maybe it's a little bit of a something like it's a bias that lived on from the bull market, but KOLs are very good when it comes to monetizing a certain audience. I'm not talking only about KOLs that will dump on you, even though there's many that will do that, right? I'm talking about affiliate marketing. I'm talking about more Web3 gaming assets, and these things do work in my experience. Even though, again, there's a lot of grifters, but again, yeah, segmentation, targeting. There's a lot going on in this industry, even though the approaches that we're using right now are very meta based. We see a project break out with a certain questing platform. Next thing you know, the week after, everyone is rolling out marketing platforms, questing platforms, right? Telegram games are breaking out, the click games, right? 2 weeks after, everyone wants to do that too, because they want to grab a hold of the supposedly huge mind share that they have and the hundreds of millions of users that they have. At some point, we will reach a balance when it comes to this. And again, Web3 in general and Web3 marketing have this huge potential. But I do think that we're starting to see, again, in light of projects that survived the bull one way or another and had to go through a bear market and had to come up with ideas that worked towards real people and that worked outside of echo chambers. You cannot survive in an echo chamber, right? You can tell yourself that this is the greatest space in the world, but that's not going to feed your mouth. It's not going to pay your bills. And I do think, I don't want to name names, or maybe I will, but branding potential is a thing. And we have seen a lot of projects that have leveraged that in a very good way. And that turns out to work, right? When you actually target the right people and when you actually use the right tools instead of throwing marketing strategies around just to, I don't know, be the biggest gigabrain on crypto Twitter. When you actually do the things that make sense, things work, and when they're targeted to the right people. And that's why we see people in Web2, so normies. That's why I see my uncle throwing a Pudgy Penguins GIF on the group chat, right? It's a cute IP. They learned how to leverage the cuteness and everything that works about the IP, right? And now they're in Walmarts. People love it. Children love it, right? They found their target and it's been working. So I do think that in this exact moment, we're like, even cycle wise, right? We're a bit in a weird spot. We got a little spike a little bit before than we should have. Maybe a lot of people got caught off guard, but we're still at times getting the bear market vibes, right? PvP, people pointing fingers, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, right, polarizing view, when things will be back at all-time highs and we will breaking up instead of down, people will say again, the Web3 gaming, like every project will make it, right? Every project that you see in the top 50 or top 100 on CoinMarketCap will be here 10 years time. We know, like, data, and it's not because of my background, but we know that data doesn't lie in this regard. Data lies, and people manipulate data in order to make it lie in so many ways. But history has repeated itself so many times by now, meaning that as of right now, you might be tricked, maybe also because of echo chambers, because of like a bunch of psychology reasons I will not ramble about. But you're tricked to think that what you have in the top 10, even that you have right now, will stay in the top 10 forever. But history proves that that is not the truth, right? So again, we will find a balance, just like people talk all the time about the balance that NFTs at some point will find after the disillusionment and after the huge peak that they got in 21 and early 22. We will find a balance with Web3 marketing too, when it comes to traditional approaches and when it comes to targeting the right people instead of just jumping on spaces and telling the same 50 people, sorry, that Web3 gaming is here to stay, right? We will showcase this to people. We will onboard people in a bunch of ways. Like, we're doing a bunch of things in order to make it happen. We're partnering with the right people, in my opinion, right? I'm obviously biased, but we will find a balance, and hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, just to jump in too, I think like I've talked a lot about the sort of values and what I'll call like the incentivization loop. Did I say that right? In Web3 gaming. Because like I think that's where part of the issues are. That's where this needs to evolve at least, right? Like I think, you know, in like Wall Street terms or whatever, most people in Web3 gaming are like in it more for the short run, I think, than the long run. And I think that's a very like just simple black and white way to try to explain what I'm saying. It's like if people took more of the long-term view, and like Antonio was talking about Telegram, it's a great example too of this incentivization loop. Like everyone knows that's 90 what percent bots, right? But nobody cares because people just want numbers, and it's like and they value those numbers. The exchanges want those numbers, and so it's all like a big game we're playing here, where at the same time when you see games or projects try to break out, it's almost like, hey, come back here, like don't forget about us, the Web3 people, and where it should be more applauding that, because like that was kind of the whole thesis when we got into this, is like, if you really think about it, everything going, someone else said this to me, Icy, I'll give him credit. It's like everything in Web3 right now is we're all building. We're all building like the infrastructure for the future. Well, at a certain point, guys, like how the fuck do we get there? Like open the road, let people drive on it, for Christ's sakes, right? Like we've been paving now for 3 years, and we're bringing in people. It is happening, and other games are doing it. They're going on Steam and things like that, and sort of breaking out. That needs to really be applauded more. I always use NFL Rivals as they're my like example, because like I read about them a lot through John Jordan, and they're like killing it in many ways, but you never hear them talking about them on Gamified or whatever. At least I don't. I don't listen every day, but like it's just like not one of those hot games. Now they don't have a token. Maybe that's why, but there's reasons like that. But these are things we try to look at too, which is people who are kind of trying to break out of the bubble.
Now, do you guys, so putting on your participating in Web3 hat as well, how do you guys think about like you're building, but you also, you may want to speculate, you may want to invest into other things too. Like, how does that kind of work for you as like, the leader of a project? Are you able to kind of do both, or, do you feel like you get pulled in multiple directions, or how do you think about that?
You're muted, Mike.
Are you asking
Either
more
or both.
like, yeah, are you asking like personal bags, or like more like with partnerships, or let me get
You
it?
just all of it in general. Like, how do you think about that? Because I'm sure a lot of other projects come to you and they're like, hey, we'll buy 50K your token if you buy 50K our token or whatever it is. Like, how does that stuff all go down? And, how do you guys think about that?
Try to be careful. I mean, just me personally, I like to bet on me and our team more than like taking chances with others. We've also seen other projects that like take their funding and make huge investment. I mean, you hear about it after the fact because of the nightmares it caused and like lose half their funding and things like this when we hit dips and such not. So for us, I'm more conservative on that side. Obviously, being in this space, you definitely get opportunities and with founders, sure. I mean, I own, I'm not like crazy involved or when that was a thing, purchasing NFTs, but certainly when they came to me and I had opportunities, like, yeah, sure, why not, and just as a company too, we've been able to participate just from some of our partners like Animoca and Mochaverse and things like that. So when opportunities come, we'll take them. We do love this space and believe in it, but this is just me. Um, Also not gonna like risk the position, we've got to get here and where we have to go with just making too crazy bets right now. More as a company, I guess I'm talking about. But Antonio, he can tell you. He's more of a he can tell you about his bags. Could go on for hours.
Yeah, well, we're not gonna talk about my bags. We don't wanna make everyone sad. I'm sad enough. But well, when it comes to Web3, I mean, history has taught us to have a bearish bias, I would say. I think that's just the truth, right? With everything that's been happening ever since MT Gox all the way to SBF, right? So history has taught to behave a certain way, to be wary. That doesn't mean that we don't like I personally love and have always loved, to join communities, see how communities are built and how they thrive, what are the psychological, behind the scenes of that. Like when I actually started going heavy bags wise, I mean, in the NFT space, I remember Gremplin with the toes was a big thing, and I remember that was I think that was one of my first aha moments. Right, it was right after a bit of like when NFTs were starting to get this mainstream mindshare. Visa got there first. Punk, things were going ballistic. Everybody knows that, right? But what I was interested in, like, why the hell are people hanging out on a Discord 24 hours a day, spamming exclamation mark vibe? What's the thing? Like, what's the thing with this, and why do I want to do this too? It works, right? And there's obviously like group psychology behind this, but this had different effects onto our bags at the time, obviously, right? And on to the mind share it got in the NFT world and the effects on the normies, right? I was going around showcasing the toes that I had to people, and I was like, "What? How much did you pay for this? Are you fucking crazy?" And then I told them how much I made from that, and all of a sudden they were hooked. Now we would want people to be hooked for incentives that are different than financial, but that worked back in 21, right? And that is what we're working on with Web3 gaming and NFTs with the use case of gaming, right? But yeah, it's important to think, and I always come with a marketing mindset, right? But I do think that it's important to remember and engrave it in our brains that tech is very different from mindshare, right? Think of Epic Games, think of Fortnite, right? They're doing interoperability, something that Web3 gaming has been rambling for a lot. They have been doing it. It's there. And it has the mainstream audience. It has everything, right? So, and they don't have, they're not using crazy tech, whatever, right? But they do have the mind share. A lot of people here, we're using new tech. that I genuinely believe is life-changing, meaning there it's opening new possibilities that just were not there before, right? If you're talking to somebody new, like somebody that's outside of Web3 about airdrops, right? And there's a lot of companies out there that are using this in smart ways. And I'm sure that a bunch of use cases we don't even know yet, and they're gonna be foreseen in the days to come, right? But it's important to remember that mindshare is different than tech, and Web3. I'm bullish on it. I'm bullish on a bunch of people, genuinely, and I'm still thinking of marketers because that's my field, right? There's a bunch of smart people, and in the like the tech too, right? I always say that it's one of the best industry to be in right now, if not the best, given how many smart people you get to know and how much you can soak in knowledge wise, mindset wise, right? How much of a how to you can learn from these people, and how much of a mindset shift in the way of thinking there is, right? When I was first starting to read the Vitalik blog, like I was watching this kid, like the first post, like he's just a kid. Look at how he thinks about things and stuff, right? And there's a bunch of smart people, and not only in the tech side of things, in the marketing side of things too. And that's why I say, sure, like meta is meta, and that's why people are doing what they're doing Web3 gaming, marketing wise. But things will evolve, and it will take time. But I'm definitely bullish on this space. But I'm keeping my bearish bias because I'm not sending Soul pre-sale to these CAs on crypto Twitter.
I was gonna say too, that was great, great round. That yeah, I think like the most sort of as you were going there a little bit, like community, right? Like that to me has been the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that drew me to this space. And I also saw it as like an evolution of what's happened in gaming the last few years. Where you sort of look at communities in gaming and just, having been in it for a while when it was just, AOL to, eventually seeing social media emerge and Discord and just it becoming much more of a huge factor in a game. That's really hard to do in Web 2 now with all the noise. But in Web 3, it's like you can be embraced very quickly and people feel, they are part of the journey, right? The community is like a member of your team. And, back to the analogy I was making with AR, 'cause I don't even think I finished it. It was yeah, the air leaves the room at times, right? But like the people, the hardcore people, the people who really believe in this, they're gonna stay through thick and thin, I think. And that's kind of what we're seeing it right now. Like we're seeing projects leave the space. Like, we won't name names. That was a big story a few weeks ago, and other projects crumbling, due to bad decisions. And so, it's back to why we're conservative, and because we're trying to build something that was scalable and will last for over time, right? And that's where we feel like, again, like the tortoise versus the hare thing, like I was saying earlier, we're definitely, yeah, times you got to sprint in this space, but we've always had that kind of more tortoise mentality of building long for the future and something bigger. Oh, and one last thing. I was gonna say the thing about Web3 too and gaming is like Web3 is bigger obviously than just gaming. And just sort of tease the things where we're going. It's like, and you're seeing this in the space, just like AI, right? Obviously, and just new areas emerging, new areas of crypto burgeoning up. I was just having to understand DPIN the other day, what that is, and just so this space is evolving, and gaming is sort of a part of it. But I think we're really looking. We've always been about games and just pushing the envelope. And I think like right now, especially given the whole market in the world, global climate, et cetera, and investment climate, it is important not to do the same old thing. You know, the investor, one of my best friend investors said this to me a few weeks ago, is like, you know, doing the same old thing right now is essentially a slow death march. And thinking now is the time to do crazy, weird, wacky things because we need new ideas right now. And so as we move forward, I would say, you know, things are brewing on our side that fall into that category. And we're really trying to make sure we maximize, you know, what we can do in this space and not just sort of fall into those same old patterns.
I love it. And I think that's a really great note to take down for any of the aspiring founders in the room is get out there and fucking swing and build something cool and take a chance and shoot your shot because, you know, Web3 is a beautiful technology, but it's also a cool funding leg to really do some cool things. Guys, we're right at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of both of your guys' times. We just entered a bit of a time loop. We're definitely down to have Planet Mojo back on the pod anytime. Maybe we'll do TRT 90 minutes or 2 hours so we can get fully into some of those rants and rambles because that's what this pod's all about. But I want to thank both of you, Michael, and you, Antonio, for your time. It was great having you guys on, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us here. We appreciate you listening to
Happy
us.
to be here.
Forever friends of
Anytime.
the pod.
Forever friends of the pod. And Jared and Ben, an absolute pleasure to be spending my Friday sitting with you guys, talking some crypto gaming, the best hosts around. Big shout out again to Planet Mojo and to the audience. This has been the Neo Tokyo Interlinked podcast, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Take care, everyone.
Tokyo.